The waitress who said no to a billionaire proposal. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Everyone in that restaurant remembered the night it happened. The crystal chandeliers shimmered over polished marble floors, and the hum of quiet luxury filled the air. But when the billionaire Alexander Vance knelt beside a modest waitress and offered her what every other woman in the city would have considered a dream, she looked him in the eyes and said no. No one knew why. The sound of her refusal had traveled through the dining hall like a rumor, echoing against the walls of wealth that had never known rejection. And yet in that moment, something shifted inside the man who had everything. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Subscribe if you believe love still changes people. Her name was Clara Reed, 28, working double shifts at Le Méridien downtown, saving every dollar for a small apartment she could call her own. Her kindness was quiet, her intelligence sharper than anyone guessed, and her dignity, that was what set her apart. Clara didn't serve people because she was beneath them. She served them because she believed in earning her way, not owing it. Alexander Vance, on the other hand, had never known the word earn. Born into power, polished by privilege, he was a man who owned buildings taller than the skyline itself. To his board, he was ruthless. To the press, untouchable. To the world, enviable. But behind the tailored suits and calculated charm, there was a silence in him. The kind that comes from a heart that hasn't felt warmth in a very long time. The night they met, it wasn't supposed to mean anything. Clara had been covering an extra shift because another waitress called in sick. The table at the corner was reserved under the name Vance. Holdings' private event. She didn't know the man whose name was printed on the reservation, owned half the street she walked every day. When Alexander entered, conversations dimmed without being asked to. His presence was effortless, the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. He wore a charcoal suit that caught the light like water, and his eyes were as unreadable as polished steel. He barely glanced at the staff. To him, people were like numbers in a ledger, useful, temporary, replaceable, until she spilled coffee on his sleeve. It was an accident. The tray slipped when someone brushed past her, and the dark stain spread across his cuff like a sin. The restaurant froze. The maitre d' turned pale. Clara's hands trembled as she reached for a napkin. "I'm so sorry, sir," she whispered. "It was my fault." But before she could finish, Alexander lifted his hand, not in anger but in restraint. "It's fine," he said evenly. His tone was calm, his expression unreadable. It wasn't fine. The fabric was ruined. But something about her voice, the sincerity, the absence of fear, made him hesitate. She wasn't groveling. She was apologizing honestly, like a person speaking to another person. He hadn't been spoken to like that in years. For the rest of the night, he found himself watching her from across the room. The way she smiled at the older couple celebrating their anniversary. The way she remembered a regular's order without writing it down. There was a warmth in her that had nothing to do with money, nothing to do with status. By the end of the evening, he called for her. Clara approached the table, trying not to show how tired she was. "Did you need something, sir?" He studied her face, the kind of look that stripped away everything superficial. "How long have you worked here?" 4 years, she said, unsure why he cared. "And before that?" 2 more in another restaurant uptown. "Before that, college, didn't finish. Life got in the way." He nodded slowly. "You're better than this place." "I'm not sure that's for you to decide," she replied. The edge in her tone surprised him. No one ever spoke to him like that. Not investors, not executives, not anyone. He leaned back, amused. "What if I offered you something better?" She frowned. "Better how?" He reached into his jacket and handed her a card, embossed elegant black with silver letters. Alexander Vance, CEO, Vance Holdings. "Dinner tomorrow night. My driver will pick you up at 7. She stared at the card for a long moment, then looked back at him. "You don't even know me." "I'd like to," he said, matter of fact, as if it were a business arrangement. "And if I say no?" He smiled slightly. "People don't say no to me." Her expression didn't change. "Then maybe it's time someone did." And with that, she set the card back on the table and walked away. The staff couldn't believe what they saw. A billionaire rejected. The maitre d' nearly fainted. But Alexander didn't look angry. He looked intrigued. For the first time in his life, someone had treated him like a man, not a prize. He left a generous tip on the table, But instead of signing the check and leaving, he lingered, watching her, wondering. Later that night, as his car glided through the city lights, his assistant asked, "Everything all right, sir?" Alexander looked out the window. The reflection of her face still burned into his mind. "No," he said quietly. "Something's wrong. What is it?" "I can't stop thinking about her." He didn't sleep. The next morning, while most men of his wealth were closing deals, Alexander Vance was sitting in his office, staring at a coffee stain on his sleeve, the one she'd left. It was absurd, irrational, unacceptable. But by noon he had made up his mind. He was going back to find her. What he didn't know was that Clara had already quit her shift early. Something about the way he looked at her the night before, curious, almost consuming, had unsettled her. She wasn't afraid of him, but she recognized danger when she saw it. Not the kind that hurts you, but the kind that changes you before you realize what's happened. Still, when she left that night, she couldn't shake the memory of his voice, calm, deep, searching. And though she'd said no, a part of her, the part that still believed in the good inside people, wondered what a man like that would do when the word no finally meant something. She would find out soon enough. Because Alexander Vance didn't take rejection as an ending. He took it as the beginning of a story he was no longer in control of. The next day, the city seemed smaller to him. Every street, every corner, every face looked like a shadow of the woman he couldn't forget. Alexander Vance had never obsessed over anything in his life. Not people, not even power. He was a man defined by discipline, by precision. But that morning, as he stared out of the tinted glass of his penthouse, all his usual certainties had come undone. He'd had women before. Models, actresses, heiresses whose smiles came pre-packaged with rehearsed admiration. They'd all said yes, and too quickly, too easily, to dinners, to proposals, to everything. But her no had echoed louder than all their yeses combined. He didn't understand it, and that was exactly why he couldn't let it go. By noon, he was in his car again, heading downtown toward Le Méridien. His driver, Harris, gave a cautious glance through the rearview mirror. "Sir, should I call ahead for privacy?" "No," Alexander said. "If she's there, I'll find her." When he walked in, the staff froze. The maitre d' nearly dropped his tray. "Mr. Vance, welcome back." "We weren't expecting—" "I'm looking for Clara Reed," Alexander interrupted. The maitre d' blinked. "Ah, Miss Reed, she took the morning off, sir." Alexander frowned. "When will she be back?" She didn't say. "Possibly never, sir. She handed in her notice after last night's shift." That surprised him. "She quit?" "Yes, sir." The maitre d' hesitated. "If I may, I don't believe it had anything to do with you. Miss Reed always said she didn't like staying in one place for too long." Alexander almost smiled. Of course she didn't. People like him built empires. People like her built peace wherever they stood, and moved on before the world could taint them. "Thank you," he said quietly, and left. But leaving didn't bring closure. That evening, while reviewing reports in his office, he found himself distracted by the smallest things. The sound of footsteps outside his door. The way the city lights shimmered like scattered diamonds. For the first time in years, numbers failed to hold his attention. His thoughts were somewhere else, with a woman who didn't belong in his world and had refused to be brought into it. "Are you all right, sir?" His assistant, Evelyn, asked carefully, placing a folder on his desk. "I'm fine. You've been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. He closed the file. "Evelyn, do we still have contact with the restaurant manager at Le Méridien?" "Yes, sir." "Do you want me to—" "No." He leaned back, thoughtful. "Never mind." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "If I may, sir." This wouldn't happen to have anything to do with last night's viral clip. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "What clip?" She pulled out her phone. Within seconds, the video filled the screen. Grainy but unmistakable. "The billionaire who got rejected." The caption read, "She said no." He watched it without expression, though a flicker of embarrassment, or was it admiration, crossed his face. In the video, Clara's voice was calm, certain. "Then maybe it's time someone did." He closed the screen. "How many views?" "Over 2 million, Evelyn said softly. "She's become a bit of a symbol online. The waitress who refused the world's most eligible billionaire." He exhaled slowly. "Perfect. Would you like us to remove it, sir?" "No," His tone was quiet but firm. Let them talk. But when Evelyn left the room, the mask slipped. Alexander poured himself a drink and stared out into the night. For years he'd lived untouched by public opinion. Now the image of a single woman's defiance had done what no competitor, scandal or lawsuit ever could. It had humbled him. Somewhere out there, she was probably laughing about the whole thing, telling her friends that men like him never learned how to hear the word no. And she'd be right, except this time he intended to learn 2 days later. Fate intervened in a way neither of them could have predicted. Clara was sitting in a quiet cafe on the east side, flipping through job listings on her phone. She didn't regret quitting, not exactly. But part of her missed the stability, the rhythm of work, the faces she'd grown used to seeing. When the bell over the door chimed, she didn't look up at first. But then a voice, low, calm, familiar, broke through the noise. I was beginning to think I'd imagined you. Her head snapped up. Alexander stood in front of her, out of place in the small, cluttered cafe. His tailored navy coat contrasted sharply with the worn wood floors and the scent of cheap espresso. Clara blinked. Mr. Vance, Alexander, he corrected gently. She closed her phone and set it aside. You shouldn't be here. He smiled faintly. You keep saying that and I keep not listening. What do you want? He hesitated before answering. Dinner. No expectations, no press, no cards, just conversation. She studied him carefully. There was something different in his tone, softer, maybe even genuine. But she'd seen that kind of sincerity before, usually moments before someone asked for something in return. I don't think that's a good idea, she said finally. Why not? Because you're used to people doing what you want. And I'm not built for that. His eyes darkened slightly. You think I want to control you? I think you're used to it, she said quietly. He leaned forward, resting his palms on the table. You said no to me once, Clara. But tell me something honestly. Was it because of who I am or because you were afraid of what saying yes might mean? Her breath caught. That's not fair. Neither is wanting someone you can't have, he said softly. For a moment, the air between them thickened. With tension, with memory, with something that scared them both. Clara looked away. You should go. He stood slowly, his voice steady but low. I will. But you should know something, Clara. I've spent my life chasing everything that looked perfect. And for the first time, I'm chasing something that isn't. He left before she could respond. When the door closed, Clara's reflection stared back at her through the window. Calm on the outside, chaos underneath. She told herself she wouldn't think about him again. But by nightfall, she caught herself wondering if he meant what he said. And the worst part, the part she didn't want to admit even to herself, was that she hoped he did. For the next few days, Clara tried to return to normal life. She picked up shifts at a bakery near the river, rented a small studio apartment with peeling paint and too much sunlight, and told herself that Alexander Vance belonged to a world that didn't need her name, but the city had other plans. Every morning, the news still mentioned him, his companies, his charity events, his polished image. Yet buried between all the headlines and gossip, she kept seeing one phrase that made her pulse quicken. The waitress who said no. People began recognizing her at the bakery. Some smiled in admiration, others whispered behind their coffee cups. The first time a customer asked for a selfie, Clara nearly laughed. The second time, she stopped laughing. She didn't want attention. She wanted peace. That's why she wasn't ready when he walked back into her life. It was late afternoon when the bakery bell chimed, and a familiar silence filled the room. The kind that comes just before something changes forever. Clara looked up from the counter, her hands dusted with flour, and froze. Alexander stood in the doorway, dressed in a simple black coat this time. No suit, no entourage, no armor. His hair was slightly tousled from the wind, and his eyes carried that same calm focus. That had unnerved her from the beginning. I didn't know billionaires ate muffins, she said softly. Only when they're made by someone impossible to forget, he replied. Her heart stuttered. You shouldn't be here. You said that last time, he said, stepping closer. And yet here I am, Clara exhaled, trying to steady her voice. What do you want, Alexander? He looked around the bakery, taking in the scent of cinnamon and sugar, the chipped walls, the warmth that no amount of money could replicate. I wanted to see where you disappeared to. You tracked me down. He didn't deny it. I asked around. People talk, especially about the woman who turned me down. That's not something to be proud of, she said. On the contrary, he murmured. It's the first honest thing anyone's ever done for me. She shook her head, half amused, half exasperated. You think this is some kind of story? You and I, we don't even live in the same universe. He studied her face. Maybe that's why I can't stop crossing over. Before she could respond, the door opened again, her manager poking his head in. Clara, I need you in the back for a second. She glanced at Alexander. Stay here. Don't buy the whole shop while I'm gone. He smiled. No promises. When she returned a few minutes later, he was gone. But on the counter, next to an untouched cup of coffee, was a note written on the back of a napkin. Dinner. One last offer. No strings, no press, no expectation. Just truth. If you still say no, I'll disappear. At the bottom, he'd drawn a small, imperfect circle, like a full moon. Beneath it, an address. Clara stared at the note for a long time. Truth. That word lingered with her all evening as she closed the bakery, wiped the counters, and tried to convince herself not to go. But curiosity, that quiet, dangerous part of her heart, had already decided. When she arrived, she didn't find a restaurant. She found him standing outside a small rooftop greenhouse overlooking the city. Strings of golden lights glowed between the glass panels, reflecting in the water below. It wasn't grand or ostentatious. It was quiet, thoughtful. I was expecting chandeliers, she said, stepping closer. I left them at home, he replied. He pulled the door open for her, and inside the air smelled like lavender and rain. There was one small table set for two, candles flickering gently between them. She sat cautiously, still uncertain why she was there. So what's this? Some billionaire redemption dinner. He smiled faintly. No, this is where I stopped talking about money. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the city floated up through the glass. Car horns, laughter, music from a distant bar. Then he said quietly, "You make me nervous." She blinked. "That's a first." "I mean it," he said. "When people look at me, I see calculation in their eyes. When you look at me, I see reflection. I don't know how to stand in front of someone who sees past what I own." Her tone softened. "Maybe that's because you've never tried to be seen." He leaned forward. "Then help me try." The vulnerability in his voice startled her. This wasn't the man from the headlines, the ruthless CEO, the cold negotiator. This was someone stripped bare, asking for something he didn't know how to name. "Alexander," she began, searching for words. "You don't need me to fix you." "I don't want to be fixed," he said. "I want to feel something that isn't transaction." Her chest tightened. "That's not how this works." "Then show me how it does." She looked away, afraid of what might happen if she didn't. "I don't belong in your life." He smiled faintly. "You already are." They ate in silence for a while, the city's glow painting gold on the glass walls. Then he said, "You once told me I was used to control." "You were right." "Everything I've ever built, I built to keep the world from touching me. And then you spilled coffee on my sleeve, and I couldn't stop thinking about the way your hands shook while you apologized." "That's not love," she said softly. "That's guilt." "Maybe at first," he admitted. "But guilt fades." This didn't. Clara looked at him, really looked, and saw the exhaustion beneath his composure, the ache of a man who'd achieved everything but still felt empty. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Because you're the first person who didn't want anything from me," he said. "And that made me want to give you everything." Her heart thudded in her chest. For a moment, she forgot the lines that separated their worlds. She saw only a man searching for redemption in her eyes, but before she could speak, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Clara froze. "No," he smiled faintly. "You don't even know what's inside." "I don't have to, just look." He opened it, not to reveal a diamond ring, but a simple silver locket. No contracts, no conditions, just something to remember this night by. She hesitated, then took it gently from his hand. "You really don't know how to do simple things, do you?" "Not until now," he said quietly. She met his gaze, and for the first time, she didn't look away. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the skyline, as if the world itself knew something irreversible had begun. And deep inside her chest, Clara felt it too. the quiet, terrifying truth that maybe, just maybe, she was falling for him. The storm broke just after midnight. Rain drummed against the glass walls of the rooftop greenhouse, each drop catching the flicker of candlelight like shards of gold. Clara stood near the door, watching the city blur beneath the downpour, her fingers absently tracing the small silver locket at her neck. Behind her, Alexander poured 2 glasses of wine. "You can wait until it passes," he said softly. "Or I can have a car take you home." She turned, half smiling. "I'm used to walking in the rain." He studied her for a moment, that quiet amusement in his eyes again. "Of course you are." Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten, as though he wasn't talking about rain at all, but about endurance. She walked back to the table and sat down, wrapping her hands around the glass he'd poured. The candle between them burned low, its flame trembling with every gust of wind. "Tell me something," she said after a while. "Something real." "Real? Something that doesn't fit in a headline." He leaned back, eyes dark against the warm light. "When I was 12, my father told me that people only loved you until you failed to give them something. Money, power, security. Take that away and you'd see what they really felt." Clara tilted her head. "And you believed him?" He gave a faint, humorless smile. "I made it true. The only way to keep people was to make sure they needed me more than I needed them." She stared into her wine. "That's not love." "I know," he said. "That's why I can't stop looking for something that is." The honesty in his voice startled her. For the first time, the distance between Billionaire and Waitress didn't seem like miles of marble floor or glass towers. It was just 2 people, broken differently, meeting in the middle. Clara took a breath. "My mother used to say that people with too much money stop hearing themselves think." He smiled faintly. "Then I'm deaf." "No," she said softly. "Just lonely." The word hit harder than she meant it to. He didn't deny it. He simply looked at her, a long, searching gaze that felt less like desire and more like recognition. The kind of look that said, "You see me, don't you?" The rain grew heavier, wrapping the greenhouse in a curtain of sound. The air was thick with electricity, the scent of wet earth rising between them. Alexander stood suddenly and walked toward the door, staring out at the storm. "Do you ever wonder," he said, "what your life would look like if one decision went differently?" "All the time," Clara said. "But I stopped trying to change the past when I realized it doesn't listen." He turned to her. "And the future. I stopped trying to predict it when I realized I never control who walks into it." He smiled faintly, as if she'd just said something profound. "You're dangerous, you know that?" She raised an eyebrow. "Because I tell the truth?" "Because you make it sound beautiful." For a moment, she didn't breathe. The candle flickered again, and the storm outside seemed to pull them closer, the air charged with something they both felt but didn't name. "Alexander," she said softly, but her voice faltered. He stepped closer, slow enough for her to move if she wanted to. She didn't. His hand brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering at her jaw. The world outside was chaos, but between them, silence. "You should let me go," she whispered. "I tried," he said. "It didn't work." Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. "If I stay, this becomes real." He nodded. "I know. And when it's real, people get hurt." He hesitated, his thumb still resting gently beneath her chin. "Then I'll be the one who gets hurt." Her eyes met his, and she believed him. That terrified her more than anything else. She took a small step back, needing air. "You don't even know me, Alexander." "Not really. I know what it feels like when you're gone." Her breath caught. "That's not the same thing. It's enough for me." The words hung between them like a confession. The storm raged on, thunder rolling through the sky, the sound vibrating through the glass beneath their feet. Clara looked down at the silver locket, then back up at him. "You think you can buy your way into meaning, but you can't. You can't build love the way you build a company." He nodded slowly. "You're right. So what are you doing?" He exhaled. "Trying to build something I can't control." Something in his voice cracked on that last word, and for a fleeting second she saw the truth. He wasn't chasing her because he wanted to win. He was chasing her because he wanted to feel, but she'd learned long ago that feeling could destroy you. Clara turned toward the door. "I should go." He reached out but stopped himself, his hand hovering in the air. "Clara, wait." She didn't look back. "You can't ask me to be a lesson." "I'm not," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to be the first thing that wasn't a mistake." Her eyes closed. The rain softened, as if even the sky was holding its breath. She opened the door and stepped out into the downpour. It was cold, relentless, cleansing. Behind her, Alexander stood motionless, watching her silhouette dissolve into the storm. For a moment, he thought she might turn around. She didn't, but when she reached the corner, she stopped and touched the locket at her neck. Inside, tucked behind the silver clasp, was a folded note she hadn't noticed before. Just 3 words written in his handwriting, "Don't disappear again." The rain blurred her tears from her face before she felt them fall, and for the first time in years, Clara realized that maybe she already had. 3 days passed before he saw her again. 3 days that felt like a kind of silence he couldn't shut off. No board meetings, no headlines. No business calls could fill the space she had left behind. Alexander Vance had been powerful long enough to know that wealth fixes everything, except what really matters. He'd thought control could protect him, but now it only reminded him how small he felt without her voice, her honesty, her presence. When she left that night, she didn't just walk out of a greenhouse. She walked out of the illusion that his life still meant something. He told himself to let it go, to forget her, to move on. But every morning his mind betrayed him, returning to the way she'd looked when the candlelight caught her eyes, the tremor in her voice when she said, "You don't even know me." He did know her. He just didn't know how to deserve her. So when his driver pulled up to the bakery one afternoon and saw the "closed for renovation" sign on the door, Alexander stepped out anyway. He pressed his hand against the cold glass, staring inside at the empty counter, the half-finished shelves. She was gone again. "Sir?" his driver asked. Alexander didn't answer. He turned away, buttoned his coat, and walked down the street. No destination, no plan, just movement. For once the city didn't seem to recognize him. And then, fate or something crueler intervened. He saw her again at the park. Clara sat alone on a bench beneath a bare oak tree, reading a book with torn pages. The wind played with her hair, and there was a kind of stillness about her that made everything around her seem to move slower. He stood for a moment, watching, uncertain whether to approach. Then she looked up and saw him. Their eyes met, and in that instant every word they hadn't said came rushing back. She closed the book carefully. "You're following me again." "I didn't know you'd be here," he said. "That's convenient." He gave a faint, self-deprecating smile. "I'm not as subtle as I used to be." Clara sighed and gestured toward the empty spot beside her. "Sit down before people think I'm scolding a ghost." He sat, leaving just enough distance between them to make it clear he still respected the boundary she'd drawn. After a moment, he said quietly, "I didn't expect you to leave without saying goodbye. You expected me to stay?" "I hoped you might." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she saw something raw in his eyes. Not pride, not charm, just longing. "I told you," she said softly. "Our worlds don't mix. I don't care about worlds anymore, Clara. I care about the spaces in between them." She turned away, staring at the lake in front of them. "You say that like you know what it costs." "I do," he said quietly. "I've spent my whole life paying for things that never mattered." She shook her head. "You can't keep saying things like that." "Why not?" "Because I'll start believing them," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. The wind carried her words away, leaving only silence between them. Finally, she stood. "You can't keep chasing me, Alexander." "Then tell me how to stop," he said. She hesitated, the locket catching the faint winter light at her throat. "You stop when you realize you don't need me to be a mirror. You stop when you start fighting for something that isn't me." "And what if I already did?" "Then you'll lose," she said softly. He rose slowly, closing the distance between them. "Maybe losing is the only thing I haven't tried." Clara froze, her pulse quickening. "You don't mean that." "I do," he said. "Because for once I'm not negotiating, I'm confessing." Her eyes softened, torn between fear and tenderness. "Alexander." He reached out, fingers barely grazing her arm. "Let me make it right." "You can't fix what isn't broken," she whispered. "Then let me learn what isn't mine to fix." That silence again, heavy, human, filled with everything both of them were afraid to say. Then a voice broke through. "Mr. Vance." They turned. A young man in a dark suit was running toward them, breathless. "Sir, the press. They found out about her. About the night at the greenhouse." Clara's face paled. "What?" the man continued nervously. There are photos, sir. They're saying you— That's enough, Alexander interrupted. His tone had changed, firm, sharp, protective. Clara stepped back, her heart sinking. They know my name? He nodded grimly. I'll handle it. She shook her head. You can't handle this like a business deal. They'll twist everything. I won't let them, he said. I'll shut it down. You can't, she said, voice trembling. They'll think I don't care what they think. The words burst out of him louder than he meant them to. He took a breath, steadying himself. I don't care what they say about me, about us, but I can't let them destroy you. She looked at him, this man who had built his entire existence on silence and control, now breaking every rule he'd ever lived by just to protect her. I didn't ask for protection, she whispered. I know, he said softly. That's why you deserve it. Her eyes glistened. And what if this ruins you? He smiled faintly. Then maybe it was worth something. She shook her head, overwhelmed. You don't understand how far they'll go. I do, he said, but this time they'll have to go through me. For a long moment, neither moved. The wind carried the faint sound of sirens from downtown, the city waking up to a scandal it didn't understand. Finally, Clara whispered, You can't save me from your world. Then I'll walk out of it, he said. And as the first cameras appeared at the edge of the park, flashing like lightning, Alexander stepped closer to her, shielding her, with his body, his coat, his presence, as if he could somehow protect her from the weight of everything he'd ever been. In that single instant, every headline about him, every rumor, every myth crumbled. The billionaire wasn't untouchable anymore. He was human, and for the first time, that was enough. By morning, the world had already chosen its version of the story. The Billionaire and the Waitress. Secret romance or scandal? Who is Clara Reed, the woman who tamed Alexander Vance? Sources claim relationship began after public rejection. Clara's face was everywhere. Grainy cafe photos, stolen footage from the park. Even the image of her walking away from the greenhouse drenched in rain. The city's obsession was immediate and merciless. She stayed inside for 2 days, blinds drawn, phone off, heart racing every time footsteps echoed in the hallway. The bakery refused to let her return. Too much press, too much attention. Even her landlord had started avoiding her, afraid the cameras outside might bring trouble. When the knocking started at midnight, she almost didn't answer. But then she heard his voice. Clara, it's me. She opened the door slowly. Alexander stood there, exhausted, rain-soaked but calm. Too calm, like a man balancing on the edge of a storm. I told you not to come here, she whispered. I had to, he said. They're going after you now, reporters, tabloids. They're camped outside my office, your building, everywhere. She crossed her arms, trembling slightly. And what exactly do you think you can do about it? He looked at her with quiet desperation. Make it stop. By doing what? Buying the truth? His jaw tightened. By telling it. Her breath caught. You can't. I can, he said. I'll go public. I'll tell them everything. That I chased you. That you said no. That you didn't want any of this. I'll make them see who's really responsible. Clara shook her head. You think they'll care? They don't want the truth, Alexander. They want a spectacle. You're giving them one. He stepped closer, rain still dripping from his hair. Then tell me what to do, Clara. Tell me how to protect you. You can't, she said softly. Because this isn't about me anymore. It's about you learning that some things can't be controlled. Not with money, not with power, not with your name. He exhaled, his voice breaking. Then what do I do? She hesitated, then said gently, You stop fighting it. Let the noise burn out. Let people talk until they get tired. The truth doesn't need a press conference. He studied her for a long moment. I don't understand what they'll do to you. Maybe I do, she said. But I also know what happens to people who stand too close to you. They stop belonging to themselves. Her words hit harder than she intended. He looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. You think I'll destroy you? She swallowed. I think you don't know how not to. The silence between them was heavy, not angry, not cold, just full of grief for something neither had ruined yet, but both could feel slipping away. Finally, she said, "You should go before the photographers find you here." He didn't move. "Is that what you really want?" She looked at him, eyes glistening. "It's what has to happen." He nodded slowly, his throat tight. "If I leave now, Clara, I won't come back." Her voice cracked. "Then don't make this harder than it already is." He hesitated a moment longer, then turned away, his footsteps fading down the hall. When the door closed, the silence pressed in on her like a weight. She sank to the floor, the locket cold against her chest, and let herself cry for the first time since the night it all began. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Alexander Vance walked into his office and called a press conference for the next morning. Evelyn, his assistant, stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, the board will let them," he said. "They've made a career out of silence. I'm done with it." At 9 a.m. the cameras rolled. He stood behind the podium, expression composed but eyes raw. "What I'm about to say is not a statement," he began. "It's a correction." Every journalist leaned forward. "For years, I've lived behind a wall, of money, of power, of reputation. And I let myself believe that meant I was untouchable, but I was wrong. Because a woman I barely knew had the courage to tell me something no one else ever did." He paused, letting the silence breathe. "She said no." Murmurs rippled through the room. "She said no to my name, no to my arrogance, no to everything I used to think defined me. And because she did, I started asking what any of it was worth." He looked down briefly, then up again. "Her name is Clara Reed, and whatever you've read about her, it's false. She didn't chase me. I chased her. And when she walked away, I realized that maybe the first true thing I've ever done in my life was to let her go." The room was silent. Cameras flashed, but for once the noise didn't seem hostile. When he finished, he stepped away from the podium, ignoring the barrage of questions shouted after him. He didn't look back. That night, Clara sat alone, scrolling through her phone. The headlines were different now. "Alexander Vance defends Waitress at emotional press conference." She said no, and he listened. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, and then her phone buzzed. A new message, no name, no number, just 4 words. "You think it's over?" Her smile faded. Outside her window, the flash of a camera glimmered once, then vanished into the dark. The following morning began with silence, the kind that feels rehearsed, deliberate, dangerous. Clara's phone rang twice before she answered. "Ms. Reed?" a man's voice said, low and firm. "This is Detective Morgan from the 12th Precinct. We need to ask you a few questions." Her heart sank. "About what?" "There's been a break-in Mr. Vance's penthouse." She froze. "Is he—" "He's fine," the detective said quickly. "But there's reason to believe the incident wasn't random." Clara felt her pulse race. "You think it's connected to the story?" "That's what we're trying to find out. Did anyone contact you recently? Any threats?" She hesitated. "You think it's over?" The message from the night before pulsed in her mind like a bruise. "Yes," she said quietly. "Last night. No number. Just words." "Can you show me the message?" She glanced at the phone, at the single text that had already been deleted by the sender. "It's gone." The detective sighed. "All right. If anything else happens, call me immediately." When the call ended, Clara sat in the quiet, staring out the window. The world outside still looked the same morning light, the same city noise, but everything felt off, unsteady, like the ground beneath her was quietly shifting. Later that day, as she tried to lose herself in the anonymity of a crowded cafe, a familiar shadow crossed the glass door. Alexander. He looked tired, though composed, dark circles beneath his eyes, but his presence still magnetic, still impossible to ignore. He spotted her and walked straight over. "I told you not to come here," she said quietly. "You say that every time," he replied, his voice low, steady, "and every time I listen less." She wanted to be angry, but exhaustion had softened her. "You shouldn't be here. The press—" "Forget the press," he interrupted. "Someone broke into my home last night. They took files, photos, things that don't belong to them." Her eyes widened. "Do the police know who did it?" "Not yet." But it wasn't random, Clara frowned. You think it's connected to us, he finished. Yes, she shook her head. That's insane. Who would? Someone who wants to remind me that everything I touch comes with a cost. He sat down across from her, his tone quieter now. I told myself I could protect you, Clara, that I could use my name to shield you, but it's the opposite. My world doesn't protect people like you. It devours them. She stared at him for a long moment, then said softly, So now what? He looked at her, really looked, as if memorizing her face. Now I stepped back, her chest tightened. What do you mean? I'm going to fix this the only way I can, by letting them have me instead of you. Alexander, that's not... It's the only way, he said. I started this. I'll end it. She reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly. You don't have to do this alone. He smiled faintly. I've always done everything alone. He nodded. And you for knowing him. The air felt heavy. The walls seemed to close in around them. What am I supposed to do with this? She whispered. Get it to the only person who can protect it, a journalist named Eliza Trent. She's been chasing this story for years. Clara frowned. And what about you? He hesitated. I'll stay behind. Slow them down, she shook her head. You can't, he smiled faintly. Someone has to buy you time. Before she could argue, footsteps echoed above them, fast, deliberate. Nathan handed her a metro pass and pointed toward a side tunnel. Go. Take the eastbound line. Don't look back. Nathan, go! The shout echoed down the corridor as she ran, her breath burning, the folder tight in her arms. She didn't stop until she reached the next platform. The train was already pulling in. She jumped on just as the doors closed. The city blurred past the windows, tunnels, lights, graffiti, all rushing together like one continuous heartbeat. Clara pressed her forehead against the cold glass and tried not to cry when she finally reached the address Nathan had given her to an old newspaper office near the river, and the sky was already turning grey. She knocked once, twice. A woman in her 40s opened the door sharp-eyed, wearing a faded cardigan and holding a mug of black coffee. You must be Clara Reed, she said calmly. Clara blinked. How do you... Eliza Trent, the woman said. Nathan called before he disappeared. Clara handed her the folder and the flash drive. He said you'd know what to do. Eliza took them, scanning the labels. Oh, I know what to do. But once this goes out, there's no going back. Clara's voice trembled. Then make it count. Eliza gave her a long, measured look. He loved you, you know. Clara looked down. That's the problem. Love shouldn't hurt this much. Eliza smiled faintly. Real love always hurts before it heals. They worked for hours, scanning documents, decrypting files, piecing together the financial trail that tied every scandal, every lie back to the people who'd silenced Alexander. By dawn, the story was ready. Eliza looked up from her laptop. One click and the entire world knows. Clara hesitated, hand hovering over the mouse. If we do this, they'll come after us too. Eliza shrugged. They already are. Clara took a deep breath and clicked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then notifications began lighting up the screen. Downloads, shares, news alerts. The story had gone live. Alexander Vance tried to expose his own company's crimes before disappearing. Evidence suggests Board conspired to silence him, the billionaire who wanted to tell the truth. The world had finally heard him. Hours later, as the city erupted with news vans and police raids, Clara sat by the window, staring out at the river. The morning light caught the locket at her throat. She opened it. Inside, beside the photo of her mother, she had placed his handwritten note. Don't disappear again. She smiled through tears. The phone on Eliza's desk rang. She answered, then froze, eyes widening. Clara turned. What is it? Eliza handed her the phone. It's for you. Clara hesitated, then lifted it to her ear. Hello? The voice on the other end was faint, hoarse, but unmistakable. Clara. Her breath caught. Alexander. He coughed lightly, as if recovering from days of silence. You shouldn't have done it. She smiled weakly. Someone had to. You've put yourself in danger, he said. I already was, she whispered. But at least now the truth is out. He paused. She could hear the wind where he was, distant, lonely. They'll come for me now. Let them, she said. You're not the villain anymore. He was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "You sound stronger than when I met you. Maybe because you finally stopped trying to save me," she said. He laughed softly, a sound that broke and healed her all at once. "You always were better at saving yourself. Where are you?" she asked. He hesitated. "Far enough to start over. Close enough to still hear your voice." Her throat tightened. "Will I see you again?" "Someday," he said. "When it's safe." The line crackled, but before it cut, she heard him say one last thing, soft, almost lost beneath the static. "Thank you for teaching me how to love something I can't own." The call ended. Clara closed her eyes. The sun broke over the skyline, spilling gold over the river, and somewhere out there and unseen, alive, Alexander Vance finally let himself breathe. But just as she began to feel peace, a knock echoed through the door downstairs. Eliza frowned. Who could that be this early? Clara's heart began to race again. Through the window she saw it. A black car pulling up to the curb, the same car as before. The knock came again, firmer this time. 3 short raps, deliberate, echoing through the small apartment. Eliza rose from her chair, motioning for Clara to stay back. "Let me handle this," she whispered. Clara's pulse quickened as she watched from the shadows near the window. The car outside idled, its headlights still off. Rain began to fall again, soft at first, then heavier, like the sky was holding its breath. Eliza opened the door halfway. "Can I help you?" A man stood in the doorway. Not one of the suited strangers from before, but someone older, with kind eyes and a rain-soaked coat. He lifted a hand slowly, as though he knew the weight of every movement. "I'm here for Clara Reed," he said quietly. Clara stepped into the light, her heart pounding. "Who are you?" The man hesitated before answering. "Someone who used to work for Alexander Vance." Eliza stiffened. "Used to?" he nodded. "He sent me," Clara froze. "That's not possible. I just spoke to him hours ago." "I know," the man said softly. "That's why he wanted me to find you before the others did." He reached into his coat and handed her a sealed envelope. "He said you'd understand." Clara took it, her fingers trembling. Inside was a small photograph. The 2 of them, sitting in the greenhouse months ago, the city lights reflecting off the glass behind them. On the back, in his familiar handwriting, were 4 words. "You were right always." She traced the ink with her thumb, her eyes filling. "Where is he?" she whispered. The man looked down. "He's gone." The words hit like a blow. "Gone where?" He met her gaze, steady, sorrowful. "He didn't make it out." For a moment everything went still, the air, the rain, her heartbeat. The photograph slipped from her hands and fluttered to the floor. Eliza stepped forward. "Is this confirmed?" The man nodded. "They found the wreckage this morning near the coast. No survivors." Clara shook her head slowly, backing away. "Don't know he called me. I heard his voice." "I know," the man said gently. "He must have made that call before he left. Maybe he knew you needed to hear it." Tears blurred her vision. "He promised, I think," the man interrupted softly. "He kept his promise in the only way he could." He handed her a second envelope, this one heavier. He wanted this to go to you if anything happened. Inside was a small silver ring, simple, unpolished, with a faint engraving on the inside. She held it up to the light and read the words, "Love is not control." Her breath broke into a quiet sob. "He said you'd understand what it meant," the man added. Clara nodded, unable to speak. Eliza reached for her shoulder, her voice trembling. "He knew this might happen, Clara. That's why he made sure the truth came out before it did." Clara sank to the floor, clutching the ring to her chest. "He didn't want power anymore," she whispered. "He just wanted peace." The rain outside grew heavier, washing the streets clean. Hours later, as dawn returned, Clara stood at the edge of the river. The city stretched out behind her, still waking up, unaware of what had been lost in its name. She opened her hand and looked at the ring again, small, unassuming, but heavier than gold. She slipped it onto a chain around her neck, beside the locket she always wore. Then she whispered into the wind, "You found peace, Alexander. Now I'll live the truth you gave your life for." Behind her, Eliza's voice called out softly, "The story's everywhere, Clara. It's all anyone's talking about. You did it. You set him free." Clara turned, eyes shining through the tears. "No, he did." Eliza smiled faintly. "What will you do now?" Clara looked back at the river. The sunrise turned the water into molten gold. "I'll open the bakery again." quietly this time, and every cup of coffee, every loaf of bread. It'll carry his name in silence. Eliza stepped closer. You still love him? Clara nodded. Love like that doesn't end. It just changes shape. They stood together, watching the city brighten. Later that morning, as Clara walked back toward the streets that once terrified her, she noticed people gathered outside newspaper stands, holding copies of the morning edition. The Vance files confirmed. Board arrested in massive fraud scandal, the billionaire who tried to save the truth. His name, once synonymous with power and pride, had become a symbol of redemption. And though he was gone, his legacy, the honesty she'd inspired in him, was alive everywhere she looked. Weeks passed. The cameras disappeared. The world moved on. But inside Clara's cafe, a small framed photograph sat near the window, the one of her and Alexander smiling under the greenhouse light. Beneath it, engraved in brass, was a single line, for the man who finally learned that love cannot be owned. Every morning, she would light a candle beside it, whisper a quiet good morning, and start the day. And sometimes when the first customer walked in and sunlight poured through the glass, she could almost feel it, that same warmth she once felt in his presence. Then maybe that's the problem, she said. For a moment neither spoke. The sound of cups clinking and quiet conversation filled the space around them. The normalcy of it all made the moment feel even more fragile. Then he said softly, I've been summoned to a board hearing tomorrow morning. They're threatening to remove me as CEO. Clara's eyes widened. They can't. They can, he said. And they will. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. She looked at him, her voice trembling. You're talking like you've already given up. He shook his head. No, I'm talking like someone who's finally learning how to lose the right things. The cafe door opened again. Two men in dark suits entered, scanning the room. Alexander's posture changed instantly. Calm, composed, but alert. Security. Clara asked. Not mine, he said. One of the men approached, stopping just short of their table. Mr. Vance, he said. We need a word. Alexander stood slowly. I'll get one later. The man's eyes flicked to Clara. We can speak here if you prefer. Alexander's tone sharpened. You can't. The man hesitated, then nodded and stepped back toward the door. We'll be in touch. When they were gone, Clara whispered, Who were they? People who think they own me, he said. And they're furious I stopped playing by their rules. She looked at him, her voice quiet but firm. Then stop playing entirely. He smiled faintly. Oh, you make it sound simple. It is, she said. You just have to want peace more than power. That sentence lingered, the kind that burrowed into him like light through glass. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. If I disappear for a few days, don't look for me. Clara's throat tightened. Don't say things like that. I'm serious, he said. There are people who won't stop until they've made this right in their own way. And their way doesn't leave room for innocence. Alexander, he stood, slipping a folded piece of paper onto the table. If anything happens, call that number. It's someone I trust. Her eyes glistened. Where are you going? He looked at her one last time. To fix what I broke. Then he turned and walked out into the cold afternoon, his coat catching the wind, his figure swallowed by the noise of the city. Clara sat motionless, the paper trembling in her hand. When she finally unfolded it, she saw a single line written in his handwriting. Some love stories aren't about happy endings. They're about learning what we were never taught to feel. The words blurred as her eyes filled with tears, and then, just as she wiped them away, she noticed something outside the window. A black car parked across the street, engine running, watching. The car didn't move for hours. Its engine purred faintly, headlights off, windows tinted too dark to see through. Clara tried to tell herself it was nothing, that she was imagining things, but every instinct in her body screamed otherwise. By the time night fell, she'd packed a small bag and left through the back door of her building. The street behind the cafe was slick with rain, and her reflection trembled in every puddle. She pulled her coat tighter and walked fast, never once looking back. She didn't call Alexander, partly because she knew he wouldn't answer, partly because she wasn't sure she wanted him to. He'd said he was going to fix what he broke, but lately it felt like everything he touched only shattered faster. Clara took a train across the city and checked into a small motel under her middle name. The room smelled faintly of dust and detergent, but it was anonymous, Safe, or so she thought. At 2:14 a.m. her phone buzzed. No caller ID, she hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A pause, then a voice she recognized immediately. "You shouldn't have left." Her breath caught. "Alexander? You're not safe." His voice was low, urgent, not like before. "They're looking for you." "Who?" There was silence then. "The people who run everything I thought I owned." Her heart pounded. "You're scaring me." "I'm sorry," he said. "But you need to listen carefully. Don't go back to your apartment. Don't trust anyone who says they're sent by me. And whatever you do, don't—" The line went dead. She tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. The next morning, a new headline appeared online. Alexander Vance missing after public scandal. Clara's vision blurred as she read the words. The article said his car had been found abandoned near the East River. His phone was off. His company released a vague statement, calling it a temporary disappearance, but she knew better. He hadn't disappeared. He'd been erased. For hours she sat on the edge of the motel bed, her hands shaking. Then she unfolded the piece of paper he'd given her and stared at the number again. The one he said to call if anything happened. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. The voice that answered was calm, measured, older. "Clara?" "Yes," she whispered. "This is Nathan Hale. I work with Alexander. Or used to." "What do you mean, used to?" A long pause. He knew they were coming for him. He tried to stop it quietly, but he was too late. Her voice broke. "Where is he?" "I don't know," Nathan said. "But I know who might. Meet me at the old hotel on Greenpoint Avenue at midnight. Don't bring your phone. Don't tell anyone you're coming." The call ended. Clara sat still for a long time, staring at the wall, until her own reflection in the cracked mirror began to look like a stranger. She packed her things again and slipped out into the night. The rain had returned, thicker this time, painting the city in gold and grey. When she reached the hotel, she saw Nathan waiting beneath the flickering neon sign, tall, composed, coat collar turned up against the wind. "You came alone," he said. "I didn't have anyone else," he nodded. "Good, because they're watching every connection he ever had." Clara frowned. "Who are they?" "The board," he said. "Not the company, the people behind it. The investors who funded his empire. They don't care about truth or about him. They care about silence." She stared at him, her heart sinking. "So you mean they're the ones who made him disappear?" Nathan didn't answer, which was answer enough. He reached into his coat and handed her an envelope. "He left this with me in case something happened." She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a small silver key and a letter in Alexander's handwriting. "Clara, if you're reading this, I've already done what had to be done. You told me once that love isn't about control, that it's about courage. I didn't understand what you meant until I realized that letting go might be the bravest thing I could ever do. This key opens a locker at Grand Central. Inside you'll find what they were trying to hide, and maybe a piece of who I used to be before I lost myself. Don't come looking for me." "Not yet." Her hands trembled as she reread the letter. "What's in that locker?" she asked. Nathan's expression darkened. "Proof. Enough to bring down everyone who tried to destroy him. But once you open it, there's no turning back." She looked down at the key, the cold metal pressing into her palm. "I'm not afraid of the truth," she said. Nathan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Then you're braver than he thinks." When she reached the station the next morning, the city was still half asleep. The marble floor gleamed under the early light, and the sound of trains echoed through the air like distant thunder. Locker 318. She found it near the far wall. Her hands shook as she slid the key into the lock and turned it. Inside was a single folder, thick, sealed, marked with a simple name: the Vance Foundation. And beneath it, a flash drive taped to the inside wall. She pulled it out and stared at it for a long moment before tucking it into her coat pocket. Then, from behind her, a voice she didn't recognize said quietly, "Miss Reed, I wouldn't open that if I were you." She turned sharply. Two men in suits stood by the column, the same faces she'd seen at the cafe. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The taller one stepped closer. "Come with us. You'll only make this worse." Clara took a single step back, the folder pressed to her chest. "You already made it worse." Then she ran, and for the first time since she met Alexander Vance, she didn't wait for him to save her. Clara sprinted through the station, her footsteps echoing over the marble floor. The folder clutched tightly against her chest. The men shouted behind her, their voices cutting through the rush hour noise. She dodged through the crowd, heart pounding, weaving between commuters and vendors. The world blurred, faces, lights, sound, until all she could hear was the thundering pulse in her own ears. Then, out of nowhere, a hand caught her wrist. "Clara!" She spun around, ready to fight, but froze. It was Nathan. "This way," he said, pulling her through a side corridor, down a maintenance stairwell that smelled of dust and metal. They burst into a dim hallway beneath the platforms, the noise of trains vibrating through the concrete walls. She caught her breath, trembling. "They found me." "I know," he said. "They've been tracking you since last night." She pressed a hand against the wall, trying to steady herself. "What's on this drive, Nathan? What's in this folder that's worth chasing me through a train station?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Everything Alexander spent his life covering up." Her stomach dropped. "Covering up?" "He didn't build his empire alone, Clara. The board used shell companies, offshore accounts. They laundered billions under his name. He tried to expose it, but when he realized how deep it went, they turned on him." She stared at him. "And now they're trying to destroy him for doing the right thing." Not haunting her, but guiding her. She smiled softly, the ring cool against her chest. "Goodbye, Alexander," she murmured, "and thank you for teaching me how to live." The doorbell chimed as another guest entered. Laughter filling the air, the scent of coffee and rain mingling together. Outside, the sky cleared, the world went on, healed. Honest changed, and in the quiet hum of her cafe, love still lingered. Not as memory, but as truth. Subscribe if you believe love can outlive power, and if you still believe that kindness can change even the hardest hearts.